Praise the Lord, guys. I'm Shaw Greenheart. And he said unto them, a certain man had two sons, and the younger came unto him, saying, Father, give me the portion of living that falleth to me. And he divided unto him his goods. Now, not many days after, the younger son gathered all together and went and dwelt into a far country, and wasted his substance with riotous living. And when he had spent all, there arose a mighty famine in the land, and he began to be in want. So he went and drew himself to a citizen of that country, who sent him into the field to feed swine. So still here in the early parts of the 15th chapter of Luke. So how did we get here so far? We saw where it opened up, where the publicans and sinners, came unto him, and the scribes and Pharisees complained that he not only received it, but eat it with them. And then we saw him tell them the story of the rich man, having lost a sheep, but not leave the 99 and one and go and search for this one. Followed up by the woman that had the 10 pieces of silver and she lost one. How she lit a candle and swept the whole house, searching for it until she found it. So here's the prodigal son, and the rest of this 15th chapter is the whole prodigal son. I believe there is 25 verses of just prodigal son. So, understanding the gist of this story, people didn't know it. I would even say that this is such a popular story that people who know nothing about, the Lord Jesus, or, the Hebrew God, the God of the Hebrews, or Christianity, they could tell you the prodigal son, that story. So, understanding this son, how he, wanted to leave home. Now, I would say that this is, wanting to go and be a part of the world, not, understanding the benefit he has of being at home with his father. So, where does this, something like this originate from? Children, when they grow up and they're under your rule, and how, you decide, things for them. Now, they do get some autonomy and some say, but for the most part, if you say no, it's no. If you say go, then it's go. And, they strive and they hunger for control of their lives. That's why you will see when they reach that, age of, being legal, how they'll go out and get themselves in trouble, and, even be taken advantage of by, the wolves of the world, because they're so eager to reach beyond the reach of their parents, to be in control of their lives. And, they end up making such bad decisions, lacking the wisdom and experience that, this world needs for you to survive in this thing. So this, was within him, and he wanted to go and be a big shot somewhere. So we see the story started out, by saying a certain man had two sons. So we know that throughout the Bible, these two sons are used, throughout. Usually one expressing a good one, the other a bad. When Jesus was crucified, there were two thieves next to him. One of them railed on him, saying, you gotta be the Son of God, save thyself and save us. And the other one rebuked him, saying, do you not fear God, seeing we are in the same condemnation, but us for our just deeds, but this man having done no wrong. We know that ultimately Adam was the first son of God. Adam was the first son of God, but he was not God himself. Jesus is the second son of God, and he is God himself. Whereas God formed Adam from the dust, Jesus was created from the Holy Spirit. And usually we see the younger son being wiser. Cain and Abel. Cain was the older brother. Abel was the younger one. Abel's sacrifice was accepted. Cain was not. That's why he slew his brother, out of rage and jealousy. There's a theme throughout the Bible of, two sons. One to express, like I said, a good, the other to express a bad. Abraham had two sons, Ishmael and then Isaac. Ishmael being the first one that was born from the handmaiden Hagar that Sarah gave, when she had lost faith that God would deliver. She said, let me bear children by my handmaid. And, she ended up despising Hagar, because she could not bear herself. And she dealt with her harshly. We would see ultimately when Isaac was born, how, Ishmael mocked him and Sarah kicked them out and they had to go, leave. So understanding that the younger son was the promise for Abraham. So, like I said, usually we see the younger son being chosen and preferred. But in this one, it's the older son that remained loyal. And the younger son, he, was the one that left and faced all these hardships and how he came back home. So this is a setting up for this whole story. A certain man had two sons, understanding that comparison is about to be used. If you were to think of just possibilities, well, you could say, well, one son would be used to express loyalty and, purpose. And then you could see the other son, being used to learn, an important life lesson, which, gives such wisdom, which is the case for this one right here. Judah had two sons, and Onan. Was wicked and the Lord slew him. Onan was supposed to go into his wife, Er's wife, and raise up seed for his brother, because that was the Levitical law. But how he spilled it on the ground instead. The Lord was angry, he slew him also. Jacob had 12 sons. We know that, greatness came from several of them. You know that Judah gave us David, Solomon, and Jesus. Joseph was governor in Egypt during the famine. Levi was the priest. He became the father of all the priests. The others, they had their accomplishments, but not on this kind of level. So these stories, they used to emphasize sons. Understanding that it was the male that was preferred. During those times. If you look at the book of Numbers, it was only the male being numbered. No females were numbered. This one man in a Zelophehad, he had daughters, and they spoke. Because when the line was being divided, their father's house was only daughters representing. And since they were not, allowed to own property, God gave an exception where let them marry into their own tribe so that, this property would fall to the husband and it would remain within the tribe. So, he's, giving this story right now in a continuance, the theme of, well, these scribes and Pharisees are trying to make Jesus look like a culprit, a wrongdoer for receiving these publicans and sinners, even eating with them. He just compared them to lost sheep and to lost coin, showing how there's great rejoicing in heaven in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner that repenteth, more than 99 just persons that need no repentance. All right, so we see it here being said how, and the younger came unto his father and said, Father, give unto me the portion of goods that falleth to me. And he divided unto him his living. So, this son, he came to the father asking for his inheritance. And it was one of my teachers back in the day that showed me how inheritance is only supposed to be given upon the death of the father. So this was an outlandish claim, asking for his inheritance while the father was yet alive. But the love of this father to his son, he gave it unto him. Understanding that in those days, cattle and crops was the main riches. Silver and gold was a thing. But if you were to give away this cattle, then it could breed and replace it. So it wasn't really a loss. And it's not like he was going anywhere and he needed a certain number, right? It's not like he would be penalized for having, how many less that he gave. So no doubt, right now, like I said, riches being cattle and crop, no doubt he couldn't go and take these, cattle with him to these far country, right? It had to be like silver and gold. It couldn't be anything that he would have to go and sell or barter with. But he needed money. So, understanding that this father, he liquidated, or maybe he had some, money lying around, but a liquidation was needed so not only he requested his inheritance before the death of the father, but also needed to be liquidated to give him this money. Because, understanding the story, how he went and he wasted it. No doubt he did not waste, sheep and cows and, other animals, horses and donkeys, or corn and wine and those things, but it was probably money that he was given. So he came unto his father and he asked him, for this thing. So we see him, wanting to step out from the shadow of his, parents. And he was the younger son, right? And we know that it's often said that how the younger siblings, they fall in the shadow of the older. We know that the law in Israel was the firstborn was to get such a great portion that it was excessive compared to the younger ones, what they would get. So that's another reason why he maybe wanted to get out from his father's house, being under his father's lead and then being in his older brother's shadow. And, we can see him having, a lust in his mind for the world, having been sheltered at home the whole time. No doubt hearing stories from the servants, because as we'll see, this man, he had many servants, hearing stories, maybe even going out and experiencing some things, but on the, behind the fence of his father and brother, not as an independent one. So no, not knowing how this world really works, right? Because he got this money and he was thinking it would last forever. It's Two and a Half Men. I remember the TV show when Charlie, he got broke and he had to live off the cheap brand, things when his brother took him shopping. How he was arguing with his accountant, where's my money? And he took a cup, the accountant took a cup. He put a hole in the bottom of it and then poured water in it, had it leak out. Now he said unto him, some men, first of all, he put a small hole. And then he said, for some people, when you pour into the cup, it leaks out like this slow. But then he said, Charlie, for you, then he put a huge hole in the bottom. Then he said, for you, Charlie, and then he poured water in it, and it all just went out all at the same time. This is how your money goes, because you're always gambling and buying these expensive things. So we can see that within this prodigal son, how he expected that this money would last him such a long time. This is a hocus pocus idea of money, because he saw his father being successful and the brother. So they say that sometimes success is the worst teacher, because then you don't know why things happen. During the failures, you can calibrate and see, okay, so this action led to this action led to this one also. Successes, they often hide, lessons if you did not go through the hard process to get it. If it was given to you, then no doubt all those hard lessons were hidden. So now we know that when he would return home, he would have such a hard lesson about money and the value of it, being rejected by all these people, where he, I see him, giving, money away so easily. Like I said, there's a idea in his mind that money never runs out. There's an idea how once you're rich, you're just rich. I think that's what's going on in his mind. Once you're rich, you're just rich. And the money, it would just like multiply miraculously. Like, when Elisha was sent to that widow and, she had the last, barrel of meal, left to bake a cake, and how it lasted the entire, famine, as promised by God. He's thinking that, well, it's going to multiply like the 5 loaves and 2 fishes, being able to feed everything and everyone. So, we see him, first of all, having a lust for this world, having, fantasies about how he thinks it should be. So now he wants to get, this thing and go and be a big shot somewhere. He wants to go and be a shot caller, known for having means and respect, among the people. But as he found out, when the money ran out, all his respect, was left. It left. They say you don't know what you have until it's gone. The protection that he had at home, the resources. But at the same time, sometimes it's better for them to experience the world, because, otherwise they can, grow with resentment. They can have unrealistic expectations. This is a life lesson teacher unto these, younger ones. So having a lust for this world in his eyes. So he came onto it. So, no doubt, how long was he thinking of doing this? How long did he get this idea before he went and asked his father? Did this build up, after some inciting incident? Did something happen between him and the father or his brother that he said, for sure now I'm ready to leave? Like I said, I'm seeing so much here how he was thinking that he would get this and then it would sustain itself and he would just be able to draw from this money forever and ever. That's why, financial literacy is so important, because otherwise, look at MC Hammer. They said that his net worth was 500 million, and that was way back in the like 80s, right? I mean, if you look at even Cash Money and like No Limit and all these other guys, their net worth was 500 million. That was way later in the 2000s. So that MC Hammer's 500 million was more like $1 billion, in that time. And he gave everybody jobs. Everybody he knew, he gave them jobs. Thinking that he would always be on top and that this money would in always. Not realizing that he had a certain time. He had a certain time to earn, and after that, it will be cut off. And then now you have to make this last. So this, younger son, he didn't know how money worked. Because if he did, then maybe he would have gone and set up his own home. He would have gone and, got a place, got some land, got his animals working and crops, planting and reaping, sowing and reaping and raising these animals, and establishing himself. No, he just wanted to party. He just wanted the party life. So, like I said, he came unto him asking for his inheritance while the father was still alive. And the father gave it to him. He divided unto him his portion of living. So what he was actually saying is, what am I worth? Give me what I'm worth, being given his portion of living, because you have to earn this living, right? And no doubt, him being so young, there's no way he could have earned this kind of money that his father gave him. So he's asking for the portion of his living when he did not earn it. I mean, if he did earn it, then, if he was to take it and do whatever he felt like, then, nobody could argue with him, right? So we also see it here being said, not many days afterwards, the younger son gathered all together and took his journey into a far country and wasted his substance with riotous living. So, what was going through his father's mind when he came and asked for this and he gave it to him? Maybe he gave it to him so easily because he never thought the son would leave. And if the son did not leave, then it would still be in the house. Then the father would say, well, it's still here. That means it's still mine, right? As much as, his name is on it. It's in the house, so it contributes to the net worth of the house. Did he give him this, so quick because he never thought he would have left? He never knew that this was the next step that was coming. Maybe he just thought that he just wanted it, just to call it his own. If he knew, would he still have given it to him? I would ask that question. So not many days afterwards, so, he was ready to go. What would he have done if the father had said no? Is the next question I would ask. Would he have been angry? Would he have moved out anyways? Tried to go survive even without money, starting out. What would have been his reaction? No doubt it wouldn't have been so kind, maybe. So, we see him gathering, all his things. So, he's saying, I'm out of here. You guys can't boss me around no more. You can't talk down to me. I want to go and be my own Lord where I can talk down to people. I think that a lot of people, they learn that the world is not so nice or pretty. And, they don't know what the responsible party was keeping up and sheltering them from. I'm talking about parents to children, that are so eager to go out and get their own like apartment and stuff. And then look at all these bills. I gotta pay for water and it's so expensive. I gotta pay for the electricity. That's so expensive. Cable, wow. Groceries. I didn't know groceries were so expensive. And then they're stuck looking. in divorces, we know that with this red pill movement, we're seeing women, saying that, we never knew that these bills were so expensive. We didn't know that you have to work so hard to get money to pay for this thing. Many of them are ready to quit, their jobs. The person that's in charge, right? How they juggle all these heavy things and make it seem like nothing, that you would say, well, I can do that, because they always have a smile on their face. They learn to bear it in silence. They learn to build strength from this thing. And, it's usually, a leader, right? So they've been doing it for a while. But the takeaway is how easy they make it look. So then this younger child, or whoever it is that was under their care, right, while they were providing all things, said, wow, this looks easy. I can do this. No doubt this was what was going in, through this younger son's mind. I seen the father. I see how he leads the servants. I see how he tells them what to do. I see how he manages the finances of the house. I see how well we do. How easy is that? I can do that. And I can have my own house and nobody can tell me what to do. So he gathered all his things, ready to move out, ready to go on his own adventure with a lot of misconceptions, right? But like I said, life is the greatest teacher. And Bible says, spare the rod, spoil the child. But then there are things like this where only life can teach them. I mean, you could not spare the rod all you want, but then this misconception is still gonna be in their mind, and they need to face this, because then they grow with bitterness. They grow up feeling that they were cheated. They grow up. That's why I say that, like careful, instructions. Teaching children, wisdom. Teaching them how things work. Not sheltering them. You shelter them, but you bring them to the front line when you shelter them. Because it's a parent's job to protect their child, right? But I think that where some parents go wrong is that they shelter their children while having the back room. When it's possible to shelter them, right there on the front line, right where you are, and show them things and show them how things work, but they're still sheltered, right? I think that that's such an important skill, for parents, wanting to raise competent children and not being afraid to give them responsibilities, not being afraid, to put things on their shoulder. I mean, obviously not things too heavy, right? So not many days afterwards, he gathered all his things. So now he's looking at what is mine and what is not mine. We know that in, developing of a child, one of the stages that they pass is the mind stage. This is mine, that is also mine. Everything is theirs. It's a natural, stage that comes. It's a sign of development. Being stuck there though is a different story. Being stuck saying, this is mine, that is mine. So we see him gathering all his things. This is mine, that is mine. This is also mine, that is mine. I wonder, did he get, time to develop? Because, there's a thing what parents do. I've seen this happen, in too many times. There's a thing that parents do, right? How the firstborn, they give him responsibility, right, over the younger ones. And as they age, first one, he continues to have responsibility, and they continue to treat the younger ones as if they're still these children, right? They don't ever cross a point where, okay, they say, all right, so the older ones, you guys are, obviously the older ones, but no, you guys are not so young anymore. And, I can't have you hiding behind, this one, the older one. So, I'm going to treat you with the same, responsibility that he has. I'm going to treat you with the same expectation. Because what they do is, in their mind, they never cross this point to realize that they have no grown, and they end up being, sheltered from too many things that they should be facing, which is good for the older one. He gets, responsibility and skills. But then, the younger ones, how about their competency? How about their development? How about their self actualization? How about, them increasing also? It's a thing that happens. So what might, could have happened is that the older one was treated a certain way because he was the older one. But then, forgetting that this younger one is also a young growing man, where the father would come to the older one about certain things. He would not go to the younger one, even though both of them were past that age. We see a separation still, based on this age, when in truth, both of them have passed that certain age. And both of them should be facing these things. Both of them should be hearing these things. You should be exposing both of them to these things. But, it's just something that happens, right? So, don't let, that point come and you don't cross it. Because, you guys are all old now. There's no older, I mean, technically by age, yes, there is an older one. But there's no older one at this point. You guys are all at that age. And I can speak to any one of you as I would speak to the older one and expect the same thing. So he straight away took his journey to a far country. So now he didn't stay close by because he wanted to forget. Why did he go so far? He wanted to forget all these ties. I am going to go out on a limb and say it's exactly what I've been saying. it's the psychology that he was trying to escape. That's why he went so far. Because if he stayed close by, then they could still come over, and they would might come over and try to impose these things on him when he is now his own man. He's not his own grown man. You're gonna come in here and tell me that X, Y, Z. No. The further away I move, then the less likely you guys are to find me. No doubt he didn't tell them where he was going. Did he tell them where he was going? We know that at the end of the story, the father was looking for him and he couldn't find him, so he waited outside. So he did not tell them where he was going. So I see an escape in here. And also, I could ask, this question came to me earlier. Did he move so far because he knew what he was about to do was irresponsible? He knew that this kind of lifestyle and living, it was a waste of things, and not wanting correction from anyone. Because if he goes somewhere and then they don't know him, so they can't come and impose anything on him because they don't know him. So now he has the complete freedom to make this bad decision, which might be the whole reason why he wants to go so far. So he wants to go so far because he wants to escape the psychology that's imposed on him, being the younger son. And also because, maybe he himself knew that this was a waste of things and that this should not be done. And the further away he moved, then there would be no one to tell him, this thing. So he went away to a far country and wasted his substance of riotous living. So, he's right now seeking adrenaline, right? He's seeking the high life. He wants the high emotions. He wants the banquets, the important, prestige. He wants to go throwing money. I bet he was throwing money around. Because, to waste money on riotous living, what does that mean? If it meant, buying things, expensive things, then when the time comes, he would still have those things and he could sell them, right? But, riotous living, I imagine, I'm seeing him, in the bars, even gambling, turning to alcohol and, too much champagne and, fine, liquor, too many tables, inviting people to come dine with him, overspending on things, thinking that this money would last forever. If you look at it, you will see that he did not expect it to run out because he did not know how money went. And why did he not know how money goes? Because he was sheltered, right? When the father was paying bills, when the father was making deals, when the father was, financial planning, when the father was expanding, when the father was considering changes within his own organization, his son was nowhere to be found. We can see him having no financial, literacy, no preparation to receive his own. No doubt this father thought that he would just be the younger son forever. And how did he break out of that? He, went far away to break from this. And if he wasted his substance, that means he has no experience with money. Like I said, he was excluded when the father was doing all these things. Instead of teaching his son, he looked at him as the younger one, maybe included the older one. So then, if you look at it like this, can you blame him for wanting to separate? Because, a man, he needs to be a man. And it's like a river that's blocked, right? It's going to flow over to the side. It's going to find some way to flow, right? Next thing you have flooding of communities and stuff like that. So then we also see it here being said how, and when he had spent all, there arose a mighty famine and he began to be in want. Isn't it funny how when you have money, it's almost like your mind is blocked, right? I don't know. There's something that happens, right? It's like, when they say, being too close so that you can't see the forest for the trees. But then, when you have no money, then, you have all these things that, okay, I could do this, I could do that, this and that. But then when the money comes, I think that's why maybe it's good to, plan, always. So that when it does come, you can say, okay, I remember I wanted to do this. And I remember I wanted to do that and that and that. So when he had spent all. So, in life, right, is there something watching that does things like this? Why couldn't this famine have come when he had money? I would ask that question. Why did it have to wait until he ran out? Do you not find that life is poetic, in this way? You could ask another question. What if the family was always there, but the money that he had, he just couldn't see it? Because if he was throwing money around, then everybody maybe ate at his table. And if everybody's eating at his table, then how can you observe that there's a famine? You have, and that money, it can get you around certain things. So there was a famine, but the kind of money that he had, they could overcharge him, for things. And maybe that's why they say he wasted his money on riotous living. This riotous living was him being overcharged because there was a famine. But, the thing is, during this famine, obviously the price, it increased so high. So was the famine always there? And he just noticed it when his money ran out because now he couldn't fill his table with all these things and have all these people come over, not realizing that they themselves were in a famine. him being so eager to please. And this is what I was trying to get at earlier. That if you shield your children too much, then they become too eager to please. They become too eager to prove themselves. If you shield your children from the real world too much, then like I said, when you're shielding them, don't have them be in the back room, but have them right by your side being shielded while you teach them and show them how things work. Because him being shielded now, he's overly eager to prove his worth. He's overly eager to get their approval. He's overly eager to show himself a man that can stand shoulder to shoulder with everybody else. And he goes about this by spending his money, thinking that this is gonna buy him friends. But as we can see, when this money was spent, then went all the people. This is such a great lesson for him in life. Because now he learned that you can't buy people. Now he learned that while you're there spending your money on these people, when he ran out, nobody spent to him. Because that's what it's going to say. Nobody gave unto him while he was giving unto everyone. So it's caused you to check yourself, right? But you see how, having children being unprepared, how they can enter the world so wrong. And a simple lesson like this, where if he was just, treated like the young man that he was, the young up and coming man that's gonna be a master of his own house, and not as the younger brother who, don't worry, daddy's gonna take care of all these things. Don't worry. Even while watching the older brother get, more responsibilities. Because the father had ingrained it in his mind that this is the older one. So there arose a mighty famine. What is a famine? In those, like I said, in those days it was crops, right? So rain. Usually a famine, you would see rain. No rain being, falling. Or if it does fall, it falls so far in between that it might as well be no benefit of the rain when it does show. That's, when it rains and then it dries out so quickly and then there's no more rain for such a long time, it might as well never have rained in the first place. So, we see this, environment being molded to test this younger son, to teach him. Because, when he would return, we would see him say, right, I am no longer worthy to be called your son, but make me as one of thy hired servants, being humbled, ready to, live life, as he should. So there was a mighty famine and he began to be in want. So now he's looking at things. Can't afford them anymore, but still wanting them. Looking at the people that were by his side, consuming all his, goods, as he so put it. Watching the people, walk away from him, turn their back to him when they saw that his money was spent. He began to be in want. So he realized that, hey, okay, I need this, I need that, I need this also, I need, So this mighty famine, when he should have saved what he had or, budgeted. And you can ask the question, okay, so he got this money, but he did not get, employment. He wasn't working until later when, he joined himself to the citizen of the country. So then, how did you expect to generate money? Do you not understand that while you have all this, that you still need, some coming in? So it shows the unpreparedness and the immaturity, which can only come from how his father and his father's house, treated him, the role that they had him playing in that house. Just a little kid, running through the hallway still, even though he's a grown man. So that's why I say it's a caution to parents to, anticipate things like this. That there's going to come a point where, hey, you need to treat them like the adult, for their benefit. Because otherwise, you raise fools, right? And they go out into the world, they get taken advantage of. How eager was this man to prove, his worth to all these people that gave not 1-2 cents about him. When he was hungry, he couldn't go to any of them. But you see, when they were hungry, he fed all of them. So there arose a mighty famine in the land, and he began to be in want. So the last one says, how? So he went and joined himself unto a citizen of that country, and he sent him into the field to feed swine. So now he's going to work for this citizen. So then you can ask the question, why not just work for your father, right? Because if you would have worked for your father, right, you'd have still had preference. You'd have been working for your father as your father's son. Now you're working for this man as a complete stranger who he cares maybe nothing about. Maybe after a couple of years of working for him, he will start to see you as family as they did in those days. But that's going to take time. Right now, you're a stranger. And if this man has children and there's a clip between you and his children, then he's going to quickly humble you to make you understand that these are his children and you are not. And you had this with your father, chose to leave. So he went and he sought employment to the citizen of the country. I wonder how he got this job. Did he go by house to house, asking who needs help with something? Can I have a job? Was he recommended by somebody? How did he, end up in this job? Right? Was this one of the people that he spent his money on? Can you imagine spending your money on somebody like that? And then now you need something and they're telling you have to work for it. I mean, what a slap in the face would that be, right? When I had money, I gave you freely. Now you're telling me I have to earn yours. But then, like I said, the lessons are being learned. What kind of man is he going to be after all this, right? He's going to have such wisdom and experience. So a citizen of that country. So we know that it's not, well, he went away in a faraway country, right? So the customs are different. So he sent him into the field to feed swine. I remember when Jesus, he cast a legion into the swine. They ran violently down a steep place and they were choked in the lake. So we know that these Jews, they don't, the swine is unclean. They don't mess with swine. So, this story is not being told if he's a Jew. Jesus is telling this story, right? A certain man. So he could be a Jew, he could also not be a Jew. I think when people try to explain this, they automatically assume that this man and his son, they are Jews. It's a possibility that they are and they aren't. But we see him sending him into the field to feed swine. So this would support that they are Jews. Because this would support that he got so low that he had to go and feed the very things that were considered unclean to his people. So now look at this. Royalty, walking, feeding swine. Can you imagine how upset his father would be if he were to come by and see his son feeding these swines? It's another thing I could speak on. How, things can fall through the cracks like this, where if everything was in place that was supposed to be, this could never happen. And it's such an injustice. How many countries in the world, are starving, where if even one of these people over here in the West would know of it, the whole place would have enough food. Before he could even hang the phone up to make the phone call, they would have so much food. But yet still nobody knows. Things falling through the cracks. So he fell through the cracks. And like I said, I can't even imagine how his father would feel to know that his son is feeding swine. Right? So here we are in, like I said, the early parts of the 15th chapter of Luke, where it started out saying, "Then gathered together unto him the publicans and sinners for to hear him. But the scribes and Pharisees murmured, saying, This man receiveth sinners and eateth with them. And Jesus put forth this parable unto them. Which man among you, if he have 100 sheep and loseth one, doth not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go to seek that which was lost, till he hath found it? And when he find it, he layeth it on his shoulder and rejoiceth. Likewise, I say unto you, there is joy in heaven over one sinner that repenteth, more than 99 just persons that need no repentance. And what woman, having 10 pieces of silver, if she lose one, does not light a candle and sweep the house? Search diligently till she had found it. And when she had found it, she called together her friends and neighbors, saying, Come, rejoice with me, for I found my piece which was lost. So likewise, there is joy in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner that repenteth. So we pick up right here where it says, So then he put forth this parable unto them. A certain man had 2 sons. And the younger came unto him, saying, Father, give me the portion of living that falleth to me. And he divided unto him his living. So then not many days after, the younger son gathered together all, took his journey into a far country, where he wasted his substance with righteous living. Now when he had spent all, there arose a mighty famine in the land. He began to be in want. So he went and joined himself unto a citizen of that country, which sent him into the field to feed swine. I am Straw Greenhorn.